All right. So thank you everyone for joining. As you know, we have a tight deadline, so we just wanted to just make this an efficient meeting, get started. I know we are, I wanted to talk about meeting schedule. Do we want to do another meeting next week, or what are thoughts around that? Yes, is everyone in consensus that we need another meeting next week? All right, so what I'll do is I
can't do next week.
Okay. All right. So are you able to, we can send you the recording. So after the meeting.
Okay.
I'll send
all right. Thank you.
Awesome. No problem. So with this meeting.
1 second, Sylvia, would you be able to join like your subcommittee, like have a conversation prior?
Oh yeah. If Mr. Terry calls one, I'll be able to, yeah, but I just can't do every Wednesday because I have another meeting on Wednesday. So when we was doing every other Wednesday, that was fine for me.
Okay.
Because I was able to go on my other meeting too. But if Mr. Henry called a meeting during the week, I'll be able to be on.
Okay, great. Hopefully he can. Okay.
He said he was trying to get in. I just texted him.
Great.
Awesome.
Let's do it.
So yes, wanted to just talk about so we'll try to do that. I think it's important, like DC Lacker said, that we're meeting in between. And also, has anyone had any issues with accessing the outline, the document, the draft, the report outline on Google Drive? Any comments?
I've added a bunch of stuff. I think you saw.
Yes. Has anyone anyone else had a chance to look at it? Any comments, thoughts, feedback, or anything like that?
Well, as far as the outline goes, one thing that I would say is that I have not looked at it in terms of organizing it and combining and condensing. I've just put down random thoughts, and a bunch of the stuff that I put down came from a meeting from the Westchester County Police Reform Commission last Wednesday, was it? Last Thursday.
Okay.
That I would.
Awesome. So actually, Mary, would you mind, we can hop on a call. We can probably consolidate down.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay. And we can
get it in better order, I think. Yeah.
And we can consolidate it so that any overlapping things, are addressed. I know some people, are working in subcommittees. Some people have kind of been working individually or would like to work individually. So I encourage you, if there's something that you're passionate about in the outline, go ahead and write your name next to it. And you can kind of flesh out the initial recommendation. And then we can come together as a whole and kind of review the recommendation and see if that's how we want to move forward. Any other thoughts about that? Sorry. So it's Joanne, right? All right. So we have 4 subcommittees, and it's police and oversight. That committee is already really done. So we have recruiting and retention, building trust and legitimacy, and someone remind me, what's the 4th committee? DC Lacker, do you have it on hand?
Is it oversight?
No, you said that.
No, you said policy and oversight. Did you say recruiting?
Yes.
Recruiting.
Something about confidence?
Yes, confidence and sustainability. So you can put in the chat which one you want to join, and I'll be happy to add you to any of those. But what we need to do is really we're in crunch time, right? So we need to start getting things on paper so that we can finalize some things and discuss it. I think one of the things, I don't know if DC Lackard has any other comments, but what we need to do in this meeting is kind of, and we talked about it a little bit in the last meeting, but we need to solidify our timeline. So how we're going to move forward, what's our deadline for when we're going to move forward, et cetera. So we touched on it. We didn't finalize it in the last meeting. So I would love to, go through that. And I don't know if you have do you have notes from the last meeting, DC Lackard?
I do.
Okay. So we can talk about that.
So are we going in order? Because we do have guests, and I wanted to introduce the guests that are here with us today. And then so I can talk about the timeline, and then I'd like to introduce the guests that we have, and then we can shift to that. How does that sound? Okay,
Sounds awesome.
so we talked a little bit about what would be the most, obviously April 1st is our deadline to get things in. I was on a conference call this afternoon with the mayor and the New York Conference of Mayors on sort of what other jurisdictions are doing here within the state around police reform. And so we really want to make sure that that April 1st date is adhered to, and that we're doing everything we can to get that report actually approved by the local legislative body. There are some jurisdictions that have actually had and produced a plan. And so I can see that there's a lot of background for uploading that online, but also be mindful that some of the smaller jurisdictions can do that, right? Some of the smaller jurisdictions that have, 20, 30,000 residents in the jurisdiction can actually come together with a plan much easier. Maybe they have a smaller city council body. It's not maybe as large as some of the challenges. So we need to be mindful that we need to move very, very quickly to put a strong plan together and be prepared that the first time around, the plan may not get approved by our city council. Obviously, the plan gets approved, it's a great day, but we need to be prepared otherwise. So we have 4 dates ahead of us on city council calendar, and the city councilman can chime in to tell us if the February 10th, I thought it was budgets that was going to be on that date, so I'm not even thinking about February 10th, but we have February 10th, February 24th, March 10th, and March 24th are the 4 city council meetings that are between now and our April 1st deadline, knowing that it still has to get approved and go through the Board of Estimates. So, there's that timeline. We don't really want to get all the way to that March 24th date either, but that's the time that we're looking at. So to be safe, we really should be looking at a February 24th date and a March 10th as a backup, and then the March 24th as an absolute drop dead date, with hopes that it gets approved in the first go around. So Councilman, before I move too far with that, do you have any initial thoughts that we should consider?
No, whatever date we choose, I'm gonna make sure I threaten everybody to make sure it gets done. So we'll be fine.
We appreciate your advocacy. And I think I just saw the senator is logging in, or his office is logging in on his behalf. So at least he'll be here with us today. So my recommendation is that we go with a date, which would most likely be February 24th. And then also build in their times for us to have public comment. We have on a call with us, we have membership, the actual PBA President, Nick Mastrogiorgio, Lieutenant Nicholas Mastrogiorgio, and then we also have Sergeant Jean Jerome, who's on as well as the Vice President. And so they're here we talked about it last time, and you asked for them to be here, and they are here, so you can ask questions, and we can go as far as we want. I know there have been some other conversations that have been held over the last couple of days, which is great. Someone's phone is not on mute.
One second, DC Lacker. I will
Yes.
say, whatever date we choose to go before the council, those of us who can come out to the chambers to make sure that we hold these our elected officials accountable, because they seem to act right when people are actually in the chambers when they have to vote, right? So those of us who can show up to the chambers and hold everyone accountable for what their vote will entail, that'll be awesome.
And we can go, full on promoting everywhere we can on social media and putting it out there to get people to attend. I would like for us to, and I talked about this earlier, having more smaller groups, very similar to this fashion, having Zoom sessions with targeted groups. So maybe a Zoom session, and we can have them in person as well, but virtually we can do a presentation of our draft recommendations, and we do that to the PBA. Then maybe we have a Zoom session and we have that with faith and clergy members. And so we kind of try to specialize the conversations, or we have one large meeting and then breakout sessions that are by the topic area, so that in those breakout rooms, the conversations are very detailed and we can get comments and feedback that'll be helpful. And so if we went with the February 24th, that means we could have a week or two or even 3 of public comment and getting things back. It just doesn't give us much time to make real changes at the recommendations we want to go back to the table. So I'm just putting that out there. Let's kind of flesh it out, but I'd love for us to get a working calendar that we're going off of so everyone knows what they are. All subcommittees should be meeting every week, in addition to us meeting as a larger group to kind of get things going. So do you want to have any questions before we move on? Anyone have any comments or concerns?
I do, Jen. So we're talking about the 24th with the presentation. What date are we talking about to have our recommendations in, and who is actually preparing and putting this whole thing together from all the subcommittees?
So, if the subcommittees can submit something, I'm happy to be the person along with whoever else wants to be involved, maybe DC Lackard or anyone else, right?
I would.
Okay, so Mary, to kind of consolidate, so it's one uniform report, and that everything is aligned, that we don't have any repetition or anything like that, and we have the best recommendations moving forward. So I'm happy to step in there.
Yeah, because I believe our subcommittee, we pretty much
the actual content from the subcommittees. That is like, we need to start doing that almost like yesterday, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm talking for the 3 of us, but I think we're there,
Okay.
and just about putting all of our stuff together. I think we're there.
Sylvia, we didn't hear you.
Who's that?
You're on mute.
I don't have anything to say.
Okay, cool.
Henry, I saw Henry join. So Henry, did you have any comments of Sylvia is not going to be able to join next week, and before you came on, we decided to meet next week again on next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Being that she's not able to join, we were wondering if your subcommittee could have a meeting prior to that date so that whoever shows up on Wednesday can give an update on your subcommittee. So Henry, I just realized I didn't get him to say yes first before I started talking.
Good evening. Hi.
Hi.
I'm quite sure I just need to touch bases with Tamika though, because she's usually the one that takes all of our notes and puts everything together for us. But yeah.
Okay, great. All right. So any other comments?
Oh gosh, no, not at the moment.
So Danielle, what do you think about, is this realistic? I know that Stefano has his committee report that he sent we're going to submit. Henry, where are you on your report?
Again, I have to touch bases with Tamika because she's the one that actually is writing everything down and putting everything together. I've just been promoted to be the voice.
Okay. Just sent a message to see what her answer is on that. And then Danielle, your policy and oversight, the recommendations that you sent, are you going to stay with that, or do you want to make additional changes?
So really, Mary, Coach D, and Axel and Anika have been taking the charge with the committee. So I think I'm gonna defer to what Mary has to say on that. And I think what they sent over was the latest version, and we move forward with that. And I'm happy to review and make sure it's aligned. And well, Mary and I and whoever else and Andam volunteered, we can review it and make sure it flows well with the rest of the report.
I just, when
Okay.
I did all of that, I had hoped to see if the rest of the commission body wanted to offer some input and changes into that. So perhaps, Danielle, we can send out some of that stuff to the rest. My hesitancy in sending it out like that is that people will forward it as if it is formally decided, which it is not until we've all agreed to that's the way we want to go. But as far as our subcommittee discussing, changing, inputting, we're done. We've put forward what we like.
Okay, great. So then really we just need to compile all of the reports in one comprehensive document, smack draft, you know, kind of like across it before we distribute it, and then send out for just the committee to review. What do you think, guys think about that?
I think that's a great idea.
I also think it.
Yeah, because I was thinking yesterday, we're really close. And like I'm looking at different reports. I'm like, I think this is it. We just need to pull it together and then just break it down.
Looking at the outline, though, it doesn't look like all of the recommendations necessarily perfectly map onto all of the bodies currently as they're divided. So when
Exactly right.
That's the only thing that has to be looked at.
Yeah, and we know that, and that's what Danielle had said earlier. It's really just a list of bullet points now. We need to get together, reorganize it, see what fits with what, and it was just to get all the ideas down on paper, so we didn't miss anything. But it is not the way that the report is definitely going to be structured.
And I think what would be helpful is.
Is that too much work on you two, Danielle?
No,
I feel like Danielle, Mary, Dwayne, Anika, Axel have been really pulling it home. Is that too much work to start to compile by next week? Do you need more help?
No, so I think the consolidation of it will be fine. I think the it's really bullet points right now. So what we can do is kind of fill in
right what goes on what.
Yeah, just fill it in, and maybe we can send it out like in that version, and then we can start to like finalize the drafts and things like that. If that
exactly
makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I also think some of our recommendations are going to overlap with other subcommittees.
Yeah.
And we may just be redundant and make it just break it down.
Each committee, right? And maybe like DC Lacker said, so eventually we all need to know what's in the report. And maybe some of the subcommittees can host a Zoom and present like what's in their sections, and just send a link out, right? Not everybody needs to join, it's not mandatory, but if you want to offer some comments, you can join those as well, just as a thought.
Do you think it's possible to get this consolidated draft before next Wednesday? Because it would give us, I know it's a push, but since we have most of the pieces, because if we're able to see from the recommended list what's missing, that Wednesday could be an opportunity for us to at least dive into more content in the missing pieces. So that's the only reason why I asked that.
Which isn't even considered an outline. It's just a list of bullet points, is online now. So feel free to jump on there and say whatever you want on it. Stick in a comment, say, I think this should come out, whatever you want to say about it. And we'll look at that while we're putting it back together correctly.
Right, I think, but what Jen was offering was saying, taking the recommendations and then adding the content that the committees have given her to put that under the bullet points that are from the recommended list, and then whatever's missing from there, we would have to add on. I think unless I'm misinterpreting that.
I think you're one step ahead.
Okay.
I think we need to just, right now, we just have a bunch of sentences. We need to decide which ones go together and what area they fall under. And then we'll put in the content. It's my belief. What do you say, Danielle?
Yes, I think we were talking about with DC Lackard is, so some of the subcommittees have already sent in some initial reports. So what I was hoping to do is to fill their like initial recommendations in underneath the bullet points that we currently have. So that's really just a copy and paste. I don't think it's any additional work, but I want to be fair, to Marion and Andam about getting it done. So I can try to shoot for before Wednesday, hopefully Monday, but I'm nervous to commit because I would hate to not deliver, right?
And I'm going on vacation Friday, but I will still work in the evening.
Yeah.
So.
Can I say something like that? To me, that sounds like a press to try to just hurry up and get that done. I think they need to take the week to get it done and get it done properly, like, you know what I mean? Because to try to hurry up and get it done before that, something might get left out, something might not get.
And I agree. I do think, for what is out there already, there's plenty of places that people can comment on that, and we'll incorporate that and put it into an more organized draft before we start really writing. I will also say that I wrote up a couple of brief narratives already for our subcommittee, so I would invite anybody from other subcommittees to do that. discussing why they've done what they've done, and that'll help us figure out where pieces go, I think. What do you say, Danielle?
I'm hesitant to give more work. I really want to get the work that we have. You know, I want to, you know, utilize the
I was
work.
just trying to incorporate her. She was like, maybe we could get this and that and then look at it and comment, but I'd like to get the comments now so we don't have to do it twice. But whatever, I'm willing to work at whatever.
So yeah, we'll shoot, you know, for as early as possible, but I don't want to say, you know, before Wednesday, but we'll try because obviously we need to keep things going. So I understand.
Well, can we just share all the subcommittee's recommendations and everybody can just review the initial
Absolutely.
that was submitted and
Yep.
and question from there and you know, start working on that, or maybe even emailing the subcommittees, or you know, where they can work something out, whether it's wording, whether it's ideas, a better solution, something like that.
I can. So I'll consolidate. If you haven't sent them directly to the co-chairs, please do. And what I'll do is consolidate all the reports that we've received and just send it out to the chain that we have going. All right. I'll also send a link to the bullet points that Mary was talking about that I shared last week. And yeah, and that way you can review that in case we don't have the comprehensive document done.
And you save one document now on your hard drive in case somebody deletes everything, please.
And I just got a message from Tamika Coverdale. She's resending the report to everyone. So we should get that in a couple of minutes, and that'll be her committee's report.
Thanks.
Just quickly, I something that I didn't, it's Anika, something that I didn't get to do was send the PDF of the survey responses, which I can do that now. I don't know when would be best for me to send that over. Danielle's nodding yes. Okay, I'll send that now so that you can include it in anything else that you are going to share, so the subcommittees can use it as they see fit.
Awesome. Thank you.
And Anika, do you still need the week or two to dissect the data, or were you able to do that already?
Yes, I do need about until at least February 15th. I think that's the time that we said.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah. So you're just sending the questions?
Excuse me?
You're just sending the questions. What are you sending us right now?
What I'm sending is the report. So the actual responses that we recorded with the survey.
Okay.
All right. So back to Vinny's original question. When are we looking to, when's the deadline for the original draft?
For the whole thing, maybe, and we want to go before the city council 24th.
Yeah, the 24th.
So maybe the 19th. 20th. I mean, it's going to be tight to that.
So the final draft for the entire commission to then review before we send it to the city council, is that correct?
I hope so, yeah.
So we should have it ready by the 17th then, no? That's 2 weeks.
2 weeks, is
that would be the next meeting. Or at the 6th, or the 16th, so people can review and we can talk on the 17th about it.
Okay, we could try for that. What do you think, Danielle?
Realistic.
But I'm wondering, but I'll do my best. I usually get stuff done. So.
Yeah.
So I'm prepared to meet more than once because the next meeting from here is the 10th and then the 17th. So I'm prepared to meet the 10th and another time after that. We're just going to probably have to have a few renditions and you know, scrubbing the information constantly. So I'll make
their videotapes because I am going to be away from the 5th through the 12th.
Okay.
I'm going to do my best to be on, but I can't be sure. I'll try it.
Awesome.
But will you be able to review the audio while you're out?
Yes.
Will you be able to review Audio, okay.
Yeah, I intend to participate as fully as if I were here, unless unforeseen circumstances happen. I'm taking the family to Disney
Okay.
World,
Nice.
and they're closing the park. They're closing the parks early at 6, so hopefully I will be back. They put up with me already. They're all running around me now. Hopefully, I'll be able to get almost as much done as I normally do.
Okay, so if we can before we finish, sort of kind of touch this up and go over some dates, and just so that we're all on the same page. I did want to be mindful of our visitors today and wanted to introduce them. One, we do have Senator Jamal with us today. He was able to join us, our co-chair, which I think we've had some communication issues with him not getting the invitation links, but he is here today. So Senator, did you have a comment, or did you just want to say hello to everyone?
Thank you for your work, everybody. And look, we, like I said, that we hopefully we've ironed those out about the links and getting on here, because obviously this is one of the things that I've obviously wanted to be foremost in front of in the legislature. So this is something that's critically important, and that April 1st deadline is something that's coming up. It's looming over. Like also for me, also in the Bronx as well, we're having conversations about what the NYPD is doing, as well, in terms of how will our municipal body and the New York City Council, deal with what recommendations, whether to ratify, much like what's happening in this city. So it's a lot going on, and I'm grateful for everybody on the commission, to DC Lacker, especially, and all of you for doing the hard work there. I stand at the ready as a resource, as someone to, I have my ideas about how we can make policing better. And I stand at the ready for discussion and conversations. So thanks.
Senator, I was just on a call earlier today with the mayor and the New York Conference of Mayors, and there was a comment that I'm not sure if I missed it, if it was actually happening, and you may know, but there was a comment that was brought up by one of the bodies that said if individuals or jurisdictions are not able to come up or get their plan reviewed and approved by their legislative body by April 1st, that the state would impose a monitor until the legislative body can approve whatever that plan is. Do you know that to be true?
I would have to look into that, but the governor explicitly mentioned that the April 1st deadline was very serious, and that he was very serious about making sure that municipalities throughout the state were in compliance. I've yet to specifically drill down on what sanctions would be and the severity of them. Monitors are generally the effort of last resort, so to speak. But I would not rule it out. I can poke around like right now to see if that's accurate. I'm not sure, but it just underscores the urgency to make sure we get these things done, at least in this municipality.
I have a question.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have a question for the senator. How are you?
I'm well, Mary. How are you?
I'm very well, Jamala. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Did you see, and I respect very much your opinion, so if every exchange I've had with you has been worthwhile, did you see the work on the Civilian Police Commission that I sent forward or not? Because I very much like your opinion on it.
I did not. If you could,
I will.
If you could forward it over to me at Senator J. Bailey at nysenate.gov.
nysenate.gov.
Correct.
Coming at you in a couple of minutes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, that was cue to me. I also wanted to thank, and we have a visitor, Wade Hardy. who's joining. He's actually just observing today from the Westchester DA's office, and he's been going around the county visiting other police reform commissions, and so he's here today, and I just wanted to welcome him. Wade, did you have any comments that you wanted to, or just intros?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Like Deputy Commissioner Lackard said, I'm, work for the DA's office. I'm retired lieutenant from White Plains Police. I'm on the White Plains Police Reform Committee, and so I know exactly what you all are going through. In the office, I was asking the various ADAs if anybody's on the Mount Vernon Reform Committee, and nobody's on them. So that's why I reached out to commissioners just to see if I can go join the meeting, because pretty much most of the other reform committees have a representative from the DA's office on the committee just to answer questions, technical questions, legal questions, what have you. So, the DA's office offers that to any of the reform committees. So, but thanks. If you have any questions at all, I'm here. I've assisted Peekskill, Mamaroneck. Like I said, I'm on White Plains. I attended the county meetings. I attended the coalition of reform committee meetings this weekend. Last week I saw, Mary and Coach on there. So any questions, just let me know. Thanks.
So does that mean you'll make yourself available to join our meetings going forward?
When I can. Send me the schedule. I'll try. Like I'm the vice president of Western Rockland Guardians Association, and we have our monthly meetings tonight at 8 o'clock. So I'm not sure how long the meeting goes. If we reach 8 o'clock, I have to jump off. But I have a lot of Zooms are like crazy right now. I heard somebody mention earlier. This is like my 7th one today. So
I know, right?
More.
I thought I'd hate the word Zoom so much.
Exactly.
So I have some. I would like to send you the same stuff that I just sent Jamal, because in there is edits to what was proposed legislation from 2017 and some references to the DA's office and procedural issues in the event that a complaint should turn to be a criminal investigation, or if there should be a concurrent criminal investigation. You'll see in that document that there are notations in red that reflect the other documents that I said that will go in place of what was in the previous legislation. It was never passed, by the way. So we just use that as a template. It's Jana Edwards' work, to give all credit where it's due. May I have your email?
Sure. It's W Hardy.
Hardy?
Yes. At westchesterda.net.
Just da.net.
Yes.
Okay, I'll send that to you right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Wade, for joining, and we hope to have you at future meetings.
Thank you.
And so next, I want to introduce our PBA president, Nick Mastrogiorgio, Lieutenant Mastrogiorgio, and Sergeant Jean Jerome. So I will let them just say hello and announce, just sort of introduce themselves, and then we can begin questions. Hopefully the subcommittees have questions to ask them. They in turn will also ask us questions based on things they've heard today, or just the background information that was sent to them over the past couple of days. So Lieutenant, Sergeant.
Hi, how you doing? Nick Mastrogiorgio, Lieutenant at the Mount Vernon Police Department, and I'm PBA President. I've been there 18 and a half years, and that's it. I'm happy to be a part of this discussion and help you guys in any way that I can.
Hi, I'm Sergeant Patrick Jean Jerome. I've been on the job for about 22 years, served on the PBA for about 10 years or so, and I'm looking forward to contributing anything I can towards this conversation.
Happy to see you guys here with us. Thank you.
All right, great. So Mary, did you want to start off with any questions that you might have for the PBA?
One thing, as I would say to Nick, who I spoke with already once, and I sent him forward some of our documents, I'd be delighted to hear his comments and thoughts, and where he thinks we've erred, where he thinks we might run into trouble, and where he thinks we're right on the money. Those 3 topics.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to read through all the documents yet.
Well, I did. You a lot.
No, I did happen to look through the framework for the
CPC.
The CPC, correct? And I mean, the one problem I see is I don't know, given the body that much power, I don't know how the guys at the department will take it. I don't know how the politicians will take it. I mean, I think it's a little scary, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing that really jumped out at me. So
The rest of it?
you know, the rest of it kind of makes sense. Like I said, you know, we definitely have to have
Better communication, right?
we have to have better communication. We have to have a better relationship with the public. And I'm all for that. You know, I just feel like giving that much power to a separate civilian body is very scary for a lot of police, that's for sure.
Because they feel it would be unfair?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, I think that having a group of people that are looking at a situation from a perspective that will greatly differ from the perspective that we look at it from is very scary. You know, I see things a lot different than the average person on the street does, you know, the average civilian person that doesn't do what we do day in and day out, you know. And it's scary to be judged by people that don't see things that way.
Hey, Lieutenant, I got a question for you.
Sure.
Well, I understand what you're saying about the scary nature of it, but do you see that whether the PBA could accept civilian oversight in some way, shape, or fashion or form?
Yeah, I think that civilian oversight in some fashion is not a bad thing, definitely. I mean, more of an advisory standpoint, I think we'd be a lot more comfortable with. But, you know, we'd have to look at the proposal in general and really take a good look at it, but we'd definitely be willing to accept something, you know. I just feel like giving that much power, hiring, firing, disciplinary, it's, you know, it's a little scary.
I think it would be approval of hiring, firing, and disciplinary. And perhaps that word should be inserted.
Okay, yeah, well, the way I read it seemed as though that was kind of final say.
These things are designed, as far as I'm concerned, which is why I was hesitant to send them out. They're designed to be a discussion point. And certainly, Dwayne, you can attest to the fact that we've had tremendous discussion on all of this. And you'll see that there are several references of places and people that have done this kind of work. And one thing that we really wanted to do was have a conversation with the PBA. And as I said to you, and rank and file officers about what's a possibility, what will work and what won't. Right. So that's why I was saying that these things should be considered as draft. Although in a lot of the research that I've done, there are many places that are having civilian oversight. Now, I also would be interested, and I know we're so pressed for time on this really, but I would be interested. I have a friend, for example, that's a mayor upstate, and I think I sent you the Middletown Police Department Police Commission report. It's a really nice report. And they have a civilian oversight body, but the mayor heads it. Okay. So there's all kinds of possibilities.
Right.
How it's structured, but without an open conversation about what we're trying to achieve with all the people that should be, as that phrase, stakeholders in it. You know, I'm just kind of flying blind here. So I pulled everything that I could out of research. What I was missing was you guys. So I'm real happy to see you today.
Oh, man, we're happy to be here, definitely.
I heard Jamal Bailey had a question. Oh, I'm sorry. Sergeant, did you want to comment?
No, the lieutenant pretty much covered.
Oh, okay.
Pretty much covered everything.
So we have a raised hand. We almost never see raised hands here. So I saw the hand. I was like, oh my gosh.
I just have one question. Like, how helpful would it be for everyone on that board to have to attend the civilian police academy so that you guys wouldn't feel as though that they wouldn't understand the perspective that you guys have looking at these incidents and issues and things that need to be discussed?
I think we put that in there, Dwayne, or did we take it out? I don't know. We've been in and out of it so many times.
Yeah, it's included. It's included. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that would be.
I must have overlooked it. I just wanted to make sure because to me, if they had that training in it and they went through the academy, it would just give a greater understanding from you guys' perspective. So to me, it really makes sense. Thanks, Coach.
Yes, Henry, and I want to say too, the whatever iteration of that you saw, because it's constantly evolving. That's the purpose of it, is to have these conversations now and constantly evolve. And
right. So nobody feels like they're the other side is coming from a perspective that's not understanding to the other.
Exactly. What is the best outcome? We're not going to make everybody happy all the time, no matter what we do.
It's impossible. It's
but
impossible.
We have to try and get to a place where most people see the benefit in what we're trying to do. That's the hope.
Mm-hmm. I think it's not worded like it's going to be the end all be all, but it like Mary said, it's there for the conversation. It should have some input, but like I said, it shouldn't be the end all be all. And everyone on the board should attend that training so they have a better understanding of what police go through on a daily basis, so they can make some informed decisions, opposed to just whether I like the police officer or not, and things of that nature.
We don't want that.
Yeah. So I think that's where
just mandating that training, I think makes it a total difference for both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah,
so
and that part of that concern also was something that we wrestled with when we were trying to decide, and I don't know if everybody that's on this call has seen this document or not. I would certainly appreciate it if they had, and if you haven't and you want it, let me know and I'll send it. But we wrestled a lot with how do we make a criteria for inclusion onto this commission, and how do you stay on this commission? And then there's also a separate document that's the legislative piece for the CCRB. And in that part, and perhaps we should pull part of that and put it into the CPC thing, is what to do with conflict resolution, particularly around disciplinary matters.
So if I may, just to the earlier point, DC Lackett, about the conversation that was had at the mayor's conference, that is accurate. I did speak with somebody exchange a text message with somebody from the governor's office indicating that April 1st, that a monitor would be placed if things are not done in short order. I'm going to get further context because I don't know if it's absolute, but that is the goal, as was stated. To this point of the conversation, I would like to thank you, gentlemen, for appearing on the side of the district that I reside in. I don't get the FaceTime with the PBA that I'd like, and I'm appreciative of the conversation, recognizing that Mount Vernon is a smaller town, and so there is much more of a conversation to be had with the PBA. It's greatly appreciated to be able to have this conversation with you. I recognize, and your job is to protect your members. Your job is to make sure that your members are safe and your members are taken care of. I think the point of, I guess, the overarching police reform that we're looking at is because, quite frankly, whether it's Mount Vernon or the city of New York or anywhere in the state, like, things haven't been working the way that they're supposed to, right? The way that they're intended to. And I guess I'd like to reach out to both of you offline for different conversations as related to things that are not necessarily within the purview of this group. But I do want to say that a little bit goes a long way, and you're showing that you're willing to engage with this commission is something that's critical, right? Because however polarizing policing is, and I've been a legislative critic, so to speak, right? Like, just to be honest, of many of the things that have happened, especially on this side, right? But I think that it goes a long way. And one of the things that you said, Mr. Maggio, was related to people not having a specific related understanding. And I think that in addition to, I guess, mandate is really a strong word for people in government like me, because there's always a fiscal with the mandate, right? So I don't like using mandate per se, but like to make sure that training is taking place. But in the Bronx, there's a Monroe College has a simulator, and there's it's the LET simulator, and it allows and the Mount Vernon PD has done some work with my office there. That should be a component of the conversation about seeing the simulation piece the split second reactions, and also like both of us. And I don't like sides, right? Because there's always more. It's not just one side versus the other, right? Like the goal is public safety, right? And if the goal is public safety, we can't have these sides per se. But what I will say is this, right? We have to continue to engage. And I would just like to see if this is the purpose of the offline conversation, because I want to make sure that we continue this conversation well past April 1st, because the problems with policing in Mount Vernon and the city of New York and throughout the state are not going to stop with the disbanding of this commission, right? That's just not real. So we have to have continued conversation. And I think that we also need something, and I'm not going to put you in a position to answer this because I know what you have to do. But one of the things that would really help going a long way is admitting, I don't want to say fault, because fault is like is a different term. But sometimes when things that are egregious that take place happen, it would be helpful for legislators, community members, police officers, PBAs to stand on the same side and be able to say, this was something that was heinous. This was something that we don't stand by. And quite frankly, we don't see that enough. And that causes a schism in what we have to do. And so like I say that to one, I'll put my information in the chat so that we can have a larger conversation.
Yeah.
But I want us to be able to have, I guess, earnest dialogue about the fact that the concept of what this has been put together, it can't end on April 1st, neither from our side or from your side, just to utilize the phrases of side. So
Right. No, yeah, definitely. I mean, I would love to continue the conversation. You know, I got to be honest with you. My experience, and at least a lot of the guys that I know and I deal with, when there is something egregious that we see, I think for the most part we do speak out on it. You know, the problem, I think, the divide between the community and the police comes down to the perspective sometimes, and something that might look horrible to one person might not look horrible to us, you know, and that's the gap that needs to be bridged, I think, between police and the community. But I definitely would love to, you know, have more conversations offline, 100%.
Yeah, like for example, and I don't want to take up so much time, DC Lackett, I apologize, but I just want to talk about like, and again, what happened in Rochester from my view. And again, I'm not a officer. I don't know what it's like to be in that situation. But what happened, I don't know the rationale behind the pepper spraying of a 9-year-old, right? It didn't happen in Mount Vernon, but this is one of these situations where, like, if we analyze it and we're able to say, look, this is not what we're doing here. That would help people feel much more comfortable in just having an acknowledgement. We saw this. We saw what happened. We don't do business like that here. Things like that will go a long way in restoring community police relations, because even if somebody doesn't agree with me, if they're going to say something against me, if they call me and give me a heads up, Senator, I didn't agree with that, but I'm going to say something tomorrow. You know what? I don't like what you're saying, right? But you gave me a heads up. And I think that, like, forget about our titles. In life as people, that's kind of what we want, right? We want courtesy and a heads up. So.
Well, also, I think, Jamal, if you look at the use of force continuum PowerPoint that I sent you, you'll see that some of what you're talking about with the use of pepper spray, for example, is addressed in that. And I think if those things become forward facing, and I have worked in maximum security with the criminally insane, with very violent people, and have seen tremendous antisocial behavior exhibited. But I'm also part of this community that has seen the perception that people have of actions of the police. And I have shared some of those perceptions, honestly. It is about managing perception. And the more communication and the more knowledge and the more openness about policy and procedure, and the more belief that the community does have a right to request certain behaviors and certain types of policing from our police department, will, I believe, decrease the conflict and increase the functioning for everybody.
I would just simply say that to that point, Mary, and I'll end with this. Senator Kevin Parker has a bill in the legislature. I don't have the bill number on me right now, but it is about the use of force continuum and trying to figure out, I guess, a new way of doing that. I don't have that bill number. I can get that bill number in short order and see if I can share that with the group.
Yeah, and I'd love that. And take a look at what I sent you. It's in there. So you'll see.
Thank you, Senator. And just so that you know, I sent an email intro to Sergeant, Lieutenant, and Senator. So the three of you are on an email chain and can continue the conversation. So thank you for that. Thank you for your questions, Mary. And let's see, is there another subcommittee that wants to ask a question to the PBA? I have Vinny Scufano. Hey, you're on mute.
I know Mr. Wagstaff had his hand raised before you came to me, so I don't know if he was talking about what was being discussed.
Thank you. I did have a comment, and first I want to apologize because I don't like to sign up for things and not keep my commitments, but inevitably, regardless of what the day was, 6 o'clock would come for the Zoom, and I'd still have a client in my office. I would still be running around. So I want to apologize that I haven't been as engaged as much as I would like to, because I'm born and raised in Mount Vernon. Many of you know that I'm a civil rights attorney, so the work that I do is directly related to this. So I'm certainly passionate about it, but my calendar has just not allowed for it. So I hate to pop in and have strong opinions where I haven't been here, where you guys have been doing the legwork. So forgive me. So I want to start with that. But in response to PBA President Master Giorgio's commentary, I certainly appreciate wanting to have civilians and the people that you interact with have an appreciation for the perspective of police officers. But I think that when we talk about the perspective of the people that you're policing, specifically in communities of color, the interaction and the understanding is very surface level and almost superficial. How many of the officers are being trained about post-traumatic slave syndrome? How many are being trained about the Black experience and understanding that we have generations of trauma, generations of distrust, because the police at their outset were not here to protect everyone. Police at the outset were here to occupy Black bodies and to make sure that these former slaves weren't getting ahead of themselves. Up until probably at least the 70s or 80s, for the most part, the police were here to occupy us, control us. So now asking us to do a simulator, do a civilian class, that's cool. But the flip side, to understand what Black in America looks like, feels like, and breathes like, you have to be willing to sit through it and have these conversations and understand what it is to have a crack addicted mother, a father that's been twice in jail. And now this interaction with this police officer may seem just like a petty larceny or seem like, but it's so much deeper for them, and there's triggers and trauma that is being prompted when they interact with a police officer. So what seems like someone that's rambunctious and why is this person behaving this way? It's so much deeper than that for that person. And if you don't have the lessons, the appreciation, and haven't been introduced to it, it just seems like this wild out of behavior, hooligan, his pants are down, and you'll never appreciate why they say fuck 12. You'll never appreciate why the music is so powerful and why so many people are listening to this music, consuming it, viewing it at this may be my option to get out of this poverty, and they're emulating this behavior because that's what's going to sell records and put me in a position to provide for my family. It's so layered deep, and if you don't have the officers that have an introduction and appreciation for that, then most of this is going to go and fall flat because it's superficial. And that's the aspect. If the officers are willing to do that, I will grab every client, every person, have them go to the simulator, listen and understand that many of the officers are overworked, underpaid, underappreciated, have all of these things. They're not getting paid their overtime. So I get it. You are human beings as well. So when you hop out of the squad car, you're hopping out pissed off about what's going home with your child that's not doing his homework, and you're coming to the equation with your life experiences, and I'm willing to appreciate that. But I need you to appreciate that we have layers and layers and layers of a lot more baggage and a lot more bullshit than we're carrying than most middle-aged white men that have come from a middle to upper middle class, Rockland, Long Island, that came to police Black bodies. And if we can't have that conversation, then this is all for naught.
Well, Mr. Wagstaff, I got to be honest with you. It is a door that swings both ways, and I agree with you 100%. I mean, we do have to. I think that's what this commission is part of, is made for. We have to increase the communication with the community. You're right, cops that, you know, I grew up in Mount Vernon, so I'm a different person. You know, Vinny grew up in Mount Vernon. You know, I'm exposed to everything Mount Vernon is, but sometimes you have cops from other places that never interacted with different types of people, different cultures and stuff like that. And they do need training for that. I agree with that 100%. You know, and I think that's part of this. Training for the cops is definitely a huge part of police reform.
I also grew up in Mount Vernon, and if you know Mount Vernon, I grew up on Franklin Avenue and 3rd Street. In regard to what you're saying, I agree with you 100%. But I think that training needs to start at the academy, right? So because the academy is where all these cops goes to get trained first. So you need to start at the academy, and then you have to make sure that when they come into the police department, that training continues, you know? So I think that's very crucial and important. So until that starts happening, you're not gonna see the change that you're looking for.
Right.
Also, I've always said this, right? If a cop is racist, right? Regardless of the training that cops get, he's gonna be racist. No amount of training is gonna change that person's perception of how they see minorities in the community. You know, it's just the reality of it. So you can go to the academy, you can get trained, you'll just be the best trained racist that there is, you know. But I do believe that training or that conversation needs to start at the Westchester County Police Academy and continue through each police department.
Sergeant, don't you think that also makes a little bit of a case for a place for civilian oversight, given what you just said?
But we're not saying we don't welcome civilian oversight. That's not what we're saying.
Well, beyond just advisory.
Well, we spoke about going to the simulation, so that way the civilian could have an idea, right? But you're looking at a small window when you go through the civilian police academy, right? It's not, you don't get a full idea of what we do every day and what we have to deal with every day. So that is why we're a little skeptical, you know, when we say like to give like, you know, the civilians the right to hire, fire, and dictate how or what kind of punishment we should have. So,
well, it wouldn't be the right to hire, but let me just give you a scenario, because one of the questions I have, and I'm sorry, Jennifer, if I'm kind of skipping through here, but one of the questions that I have here is regarding an officer that's criminally charged based on a civilian complaint being reinstated. How that hurts faith and trust in the Mount Vernon Police Department. Now, I'm a unionist too. I was a chief shop steward for God knows how long, and I know Nick. You know, we take an oath and we have a responsibility to our members. But in order to really handle and deal with what in the survey shows that 80% of Mount Vernon people want a police reform, we got to deal with that trust. So in a situation like that, Nick, how do you handle that? How do you do that, and at the same time weigh what the citizens are concerned about in terms of faith and trust in the Mount Vernon Police Department?
Well, you're asking if what do we do in the case where a civilian complaint leads to a criminal charge?
Yeah, a criminal charge, and then you have a responsibility as a unionist to try to reinstate them. But then on the other end, what happens is that the citizenry hears this, and it's like it contributes to that lack of faith and trust that William is talking about.
Well, first of all, if it turns into a criminal charge and that person's found guilty, more than likely, depending on the charge, they can be fired and let go. I mean, once it gets to that level, there's not much we can do to reinstate that person. Now, if it relates to a criminal charge or it turns into a criminal charge and that person is awaiting a trial or something like that, they are innocent until proven guilty like everybody else in the world. I mean, that's my take on it. Now, once that person's found guilty of a crime and they're convicted of that crime or they plead guilty to it, then they're at the mercy of whatever happens to them, you know. But until that happens, they're just like every other human being on earth. They're innocent until proven guilty.
I'm sorry, just to piggyback off what Nick is just saying. I want you guys to understand that Nick and I, we have no tolerance, right, for someone who commits a crime and have been convicted of that crime. As a matter of fact, we've had those conversations with the members of our union. So one of the things you said was charge. Like the citizens have a right to due process, right? So should a police officer. They should have a right to a due process. If at the end of the due process they find guilty, yes, we have no problem getting rid of them. But until that time, that officer has a right, I believe, to be modified, right, until the whole process is played out. So maybe by explaining that to the people of Mount Vernon or the citizens, that they would understand that the same way they have a right, you know, to due process, we have a right to due process. Now, I'm not saying to put them back in the public, you know, before it's over, but they can work inside until the whole thing is over, and then we go from there.
And my last thing is the same question to Wade Hardy. I know you're in the DA's office. What's your perspective on that?
Oh, came here to watch. But no, I definitely hear what you're saying. I was a police officer. I was in a union, but now I'm a deputy chief criminal investigator, and I oversee the public integrity unit. I started January 4th, and cases where officers are accused of criminal activity comes to my office, and my guys will be doing the investigation. So that's you know, one aspect of it, and you know, like the officer said, if you know, if the person while the case is being tried in court, they're innocent. But once you know, if they're convicted, that's you know, that's between the city, the police officer, and the union to decide what happens to that police officer. But
And
I get
that's all in that draft legislation stuff that I sent you. And I don't think that anything we have proposed would ever go over the top of what is due process for anyone, either legally or with the union. I mean, nobody's saying that people are going to go say, I don't like the way your uniform looks, you're fired. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's not at all what people are talking about.
The question was, what if an officer is charged? You know, how do we feel about that officer going back into the public? So I think that's the answer Mr. Wade was trying to, I mean, that's the question Mr. Wade was trying to answer. Not going over the top because their uniform, you know, is improper. It's about if an officer is charged, right, they haven't been found guilty, they have a right to a due process. So until that due process takes its course, that officer has the right to come to work inside, not go back out and engage the public, work inside until the process is complete.
And just something else, you know, and this might be specific to some stuff going on in Mount Vernon without getting into too much detail, but the department and the city should, in cases when people may be criminally charged, move as quickly as possible to get rid of the case. So you know, in Mount Vernon now, we have cases that have been sitting here for a very long time. And you have officers being, in my opinion, unfairly punished for something they haven't been convicted of yet, either departmentally or criminally. So, you know, that it goes both ways. You know, again, when a cop commits a crime and they do something egregious, it makes my job a lot harder. So I'm not really one for defending that person. You know, if they do some egregious crime, then you know, they get what's coming to them. But we are afforded due process, or we should be afforded due process like everybody else is. And that's something that doesn't happen here. And I think that is a big cause in Mount Vernon for the disconnect between the community waiting for something to happen and us, the cops, you know, wanting our cops back. And now we've been in limbo for such a long time. So it goes both ways. I don't know if that makes a little sense, but.
No, it does. It does. And as I said to you when we spoke before, I think that, you know, the idea behind this is to make functioning better across the board for everyone. And also though, to tackle, I'm sorry, I've got a noisy house, but to tackle those perceptions that interfere with that. So when there's a perception that due process hasn't been afforded, or due process is taking too long, or people are left in limbo, that's a problem. It's a problem for everybody.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
those are things that should be addressed, whether that be by the city council, be by the mayor, be by the police commissioner. I mean, we're talking any number of ways, but the effort that we're trying to make is to improve communication and understanding of what's happening by both forward-facing policies to the public, by civilian engagement into the process, by, for some police officers, obviously not you or you wouldn't be here, but for some understanding that there is an accountability to the general public, and that we're the ones that want you here and want you to do a particular job for us. So yeah, it's communication and agreement and a common goal. And then we're back to why I think a mission statement is so important, because I do feel that if we all can start to say, yeah, that's where we want to go, we'll be able to start to see how we can get there together.
Nick, if
Hey, William.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I sent you.
Thank you. Nick, I know your sister Jen. I have known people in your family or of your family, so I know that you are born and raised in Mount Vernon and have a perspective that many other officers don't. But I think that the question that you just asked, or the circumstance you just posed, is a perfect example. And I don't even think that this was intentional, but I think this highlights some of the blind spots. You asked the question about what about due process for the officer? So coach raised the situation, and what about someone that was charged because of a civilian complaint, and now they were allowed to go back to work? And your response, which is a reasonable response, was, well, what about his due process? Why should the officer be held out, or why should the officer already be convicted in the court of public opinion before they get their due process? Now, on the surface, that's a reasonable question. But when you're talking about what I think the essence of Coach's question is the community's perception, everything that I rattled off before goes into that communal perception, and appreciating that this community that has been, in their mind, railroaded and treated unfairly by the police, frankly, don't give a F about due process for a cop. They don't want to hear about that. All they know is this officer was accused of a crime and he's back to work. If I was accused of a crime, I'd be in Westchester County in Valhalla waiting for bail, and nobody would care. So they can't get to, it's not even they're not able to cognate this due process concept, and maybe he's a working guy or working gal and they can't get there. So I think that if people are able to, on the other side of the blue wall, and not saying that you have one, appreciate, they still want this guy held accountable because they're not able to get to the due process argument. They didn't get there yet because of the trauma, because of their experiences. They can't get there. They are constitutionally incapable of having the compassion you're asking them to have for a police officer because their life experiences. And that to me is, I don't know how we break it. Who's gonna move first? Is it gonna be the officer saying, you know what, I'm gonna be the bigger person, we're gonna be the bigger group, we are paid to protect and serve, so we're gonna take it on the chin, even though we're getting the short end of the stick proverbially at this point. Let's look at the disproportionate period of time where we got the benefit of the doubt. We cracked heads with impunity. The union was so strong that nothing happened to us. So now there's a bit of a tipping of the scale. It's uncomfortable when you're the officer, but if we're being not equal, but equitable, we recognize that this tipping of the scale is necessary for us to ever achieve the goals that we want, which is an equitable society.
Parity.
So I want to keep us on task because I believe that there's one or two comments and I would like for us to move forward. I do believe that this brings to the focus that this conversation needs to be had on multiple levels and other forums with multiple stakeholders, diverse stakeholders, because I think just even having the conversation, when I had community conversations, it was new. It's the fact that you're bringing law enforcement to the table to have these conversations with the public. And I think we should not, let this be the end of it. But we literally, with this group, we can talk about this all night. So I want us to sort of move forward. I know Andam had a comment, I believe. Andam, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I mean, it's just considering what William had just said and some of the comments I'm hearing. I'm wondering about the number of officers that have been fired over the last like couple of years since we're like speaking about this, and even just like considering complaints. I know New York City numbers more, but like in New York City, you have like roughly like 5,000 civilian complaints, like over the last, like annually. Only about like 30% of those civilian complaints are actually investigated. 10% are only 10% are found to be valid. So 90% are invalidated off the bat. And so when we're here speaking about a civilian, a CCRB, or some sort of oversight and accountability, I think like we need to be like real about empirically like what has been the status quo for all of history, really, but especially if we're talking about the last couple of years. And so while I respect the officers and their perspective and what they said, and as Senator Bailey said, like I understand, Nick, like it's you're supposed to protect your members, and I was a teacher, I was in a union as well. I get where the perspective is, but this is all about accountability. And so like when we're looking at the CCRB, the city, the charter as it's like already been put forth, it doesn't call for anything that's binding. Right now it's non-binding, and I actually think that's a huge problem. I think that we should have an independent prosecutor that's totally distinct from the police, anyone who has been a police officer, anyone who has like been on held public office previously. This needs to be totally controlled by the civilians. They need to be able to be empowered to actually effectuate change, when we've seen so far in cities and municipalities across the country that unless there is some sort, because New York City has had civilian oversight for a long time, right? It hasn't stopped all of these crimes that we've continuously seen. And it's not even about race in the sense of who the officer is, right? This is systemic. We can have as many black officers. Most of the issues I've had with cops have actually been from officers of color. And again, I understand what William's saying in terms of like potentially a different perspective that we're coming from. But again, this is a systemic issue that's rooted in power and lack of accountability and oversight. So when we're talking about right now creating a system to make that happen, well, there needs to be, again, something that's binding, that the police department cannot just say, oh, we see your recommendation, it's going to be thrown to the side. I personally would like to see it be an elected body where there's like the power is democratized throughout the community. But I understand that's like there are issues that come with that as well. But like I think we just need to be real about like what we're talking about and what the actual status quo has been in terms of this. So
and
thank you, Andrew, for those comments.
Something that exists, but we're not properly utilizing it. There are legislative bodies, there are mayors, town supervisors, and village supervisors that get elected that are at the end of the day the commander-in-chief of the police force. So if we're not at the polls, we can get pissed off and say there needs to be another body. There's a body. We're not utilizing that body and holding the bodies that are already in existence accountable with our vote, because we give the vote away. If you come to the church 2 weeks before the pastor says you can speak, that's who we vote for. We're not holding them accountable after we give them the vote. So I think there are other ways we can do it, but we can't say that there's not something in place. We got to hold ourselves somewhat accountable. We're not utilizing the outlets that are available. The police union is not stupid. They get behind the politicians and they vote in mass the way that the Hasidim did in Brooklyn. People were upset that they were still able to do the religious ceremonies, but the mayor of New York knew crystal clear, if you go and you disrespect this group of people, you're going to have political blowback. So if we organize and we're voting consistent with what we want to be done politically and policy-wise, I think that there are mechanisms that are in place. We can't blame that all on the police. We're not utilizing and holding the electeds accountable for the things that are hurting us.
So I just forward those documents. If you guys would look and see at what we came up with for a civilian police commission and where the issue is going to be with oversight. And I think it's pretty clear, but you need to also read the CCRB stuff and the proposed legislative wording that deals with some of the union, DA, who decides issues, which again, you know, we've been discussing this till it's coming out our ears, and it doesn't mean the way that it is the way that it has to stand. I'm more than happy to hear different viewpoints on how those things can be handled. But I really feel at this point that there has to be some significant method of civilian oversight. I mean, that's the way that things are going, you know? So please.
So, and Mary, you have this, Mary, we've been going back and forth with this for some time around oversight. And when I heard Andrew talk about elected seats on the CCRB, I kind of smiled a little bit because, you know, he would have had a good time on that, the group with Dwayne and others. We kind of met and talked about the CCRB in the very beginning. And I still feel pretty strongly that, you know, the civilian piece, and the more and more that we're moving, I'm shifting to really thinking that we need to change the direction of where we are. But to William's point, I do think that while the PBA is here, in terms of the long-term plans that we're trying to make, and this has come up in New York City and other places, the PBA can redirect the outcome of anything that happens. Maybe because there's maybe political undertones in larger cities, and sort of the pressure goes to kind of move away from that. And I think this commission would be better suited to sort of look at what does that relationship look like with PBA, right? And what happens when there's an issue that we don't agree with, and how do we resolve that? Because I think that's going to happen. There are going to be times where, you know, and Nick and I, Lieutenant Master Georgia and I had this conversation today. There are going to be times when we don't necessarily agree. So what happens then when you're not on the same page, and how do we resolve it? And where does this CPC, the Civilian Police Commission, come on board? I personally, given the fact that we are looking at doing a CCRB and really layering that, I do believe that a CCRB and a CPC is too much for a town like Mount Vernon with 70, 80,000 members. When you look at what the CPC in the jurisdictions and populations where those type of commissions or citizen review committees exist, they're in committees that have populations of hundreds of thousands of people. So I believe the CPC was modeled off of Portland. And Portland has something of 600,000 members, and their police department has like 900 officers. So when you think of
a great deal of it's modeled off Middletown New York Police Commission, because that's where I used to live, and they are only 22,000. It is not, it doesn't matter how many people there are in the population. And I do want to just jump back for a quick second.
Well, you've got to, Mary, you've got to let me speak about this. So it's either going to be too much where it's a large jurisdiction, or it's too small where the actual commission is actually serving a purpose and helping because they don't have the bodies to do the work. So we have to figure out where that happy medium is. But for us, for Mount Vernon, to have an executive commission, which prior to this, when Commissioner Scott before he even came on board, there was just one commissioner. There was no deputy commissioner. There was definitely not a first deputy commissioner. So you got to think now, in this year, even with COVID, you now have a commissioner that's come in play. You have a first deputy commissioner with experience at a large police department. And then you have now a deputy commissioner that's a civilian that has been doing advocacy work. Now you put the three of us together and we're working towards this reform, but there's all this stuff that has happened over the past couple of years that have not been done, and we're wading through all of that. And so it is very realistic to say that the community is tired and frustrated and they want to see change. But we also need to acknowledge that we don't want to overshoot and say now, because of that, we need a civilian commission, and then we need a CCRB, and then we, sort of like, how many layers do we need? Now we've taken an issue that could have really just been resolved a little more simplified and made it so bureaucratic that we can't get anything done. And then when there is an issue that people are upset about or they don't agree on, now they're all pointing fingers at each other because no one wants to take responsibility. No, that wasn't me, that was the PBA. Nope, that wasn't them, that was the commission. Oh, nope, that was the CCRB. Nope, that was the mayor. Oh no, that's the public safety chair off of the council. Meanwhile, we still don't get anything done. So I agree with many of the things that were said here today, but I also want us to kind of stop for a second and say, in terms of implementation, I've been in this department for 6 months. There have been a lot of things that our police commissioner have put in place that we have been challenged with even implementing because there are organizational challenges within the city that we can't even get by, i.e. paying bills on time, not having the right resources, not being up to par and equitable with other departments, having a badge drain and loss of morale in the department. You name it, and we've got that. We're dealing with that. So I want us to put recommendations together that are meaningful, that can be implemented at every level, and it doesn't complicate things. When I read through these things, I sort of shudder because my thing is, how do you implement? and that's the part I'm having problems with. Not that none of these are great ideas. It's how do we implement great ideas to see change that the community wants to see. So that's what I'll be thinking about as I kind of look through this stuff. Great ideas, how do we implement it? Is this going to be a 3-year plan? And then everyone is like, yeah, see, that told you it wasn't about nothing. And meanwhile, everyone's pointing fingers. So I just want to make that comment. And I want us to figure out a way how we can continue to have this conversation, but also being very meaningful and intentional about what we do, so that when we walk away, this commission doesn't, sunset, because this commission will sunset, and everyone that's on here will kind of go into some other capacity, whatever it is that we create. But I just want us to be meaningful about this. There's some really strong bodies here and advocates from different levels. The second that this gets where now it's so complicated and so layered and we can't actually accomplish anything, then we've all wasted our time here. And that's not what I would like to accomplish. So I am going to, all right, so Dwayne said the CPC can be the sole entity with CCRB or something of that sort as a subgroup. Yeah, but it's still yet another layer.
That's how it's designed. It is unfortunate that some would feel that it would be too complicated to implement, but it is based in good sound research, and it's based in community desire. The actual mechanism of how certain interactions would take place can be discussed and modified through, but the implementation of some civilian oversight is really, I think, a fait accompli. It is absolutely what 21st century policing is all about. And I'm sorry, Susie, if that's difficult to implement.
You're my nice black girl. In my call.
Thank you. We just need to hash that out, Mary. We've talked about this and we've gone over this of different, not the CPC, but we've talked about it in difference. It's not that I disagree, but I am about solutions. And so I understand the challenges in the short time that I've been in this department in getting certain things done. I'm a little concerned about adding something of this nature in addition to a CCRB. I think the community is 400% on a CCRB, and a completely civilian-led CCRB, I think is something that the community can get behind, and even within the department if it's layered correctly. To add another dimension to that, I just don't, I think with us not having time, not being able to flesh it out, we can create loose language, but to have a very strict language on what it's going to be and what it's called is just something I'm a little fearful of.
I can understand your fear. It is difficult when we try and do something that's new and different, but a CCRB alone has to be created in much the same way as a civilian oversight committee, which we didn't call it. We tried to call it a civilian police commission to indicate that we wanted it to be collaborative. And it only makes sense that the CCRB, and in through all the research, and I've supplied bibliographies and citations and sources for where this rationale comes from, it is to me the logical outgrowth of that effort and part of that effort. Can I modify what we've written? Absolutely. Can we discuss how it goes? Totally. But I do think that CCRB alone, which, only investigates selected complaints, is not really a civilian police commission. The civilian population wants to have input into what happens with our police department, not just as it relates to a particular incident or a complaint, with the overall functioning and role that the police play within our community and how they play it. So that's why it became that. And I feel pretty good about that. I am sorry that you find it difficult, that it might be difficult to implement, but difficult to implement has never stopped me, unfortunately.
I'd be curious to hear, everyone else's thoughts, people who haven't been commenting on it, and see if there's any thoughts that haven't been heard.
Well, one thing I could talk about when you talk about the civilian oversight, and, Coach D said it, and my question to Coach D is, we have had civilian oversight. You have city council members that you voted in. You've had mayors that you have voted in. You've had senators. You've had you've had congressmen. And to me, and I've always felt this way, I'm not a big politics kind of guy, but when are we holding people responsible for this from the get-go? And how I look at it, yes, police officer, 29 years in the city that I was born and raised in. And to me, it's kind of like, yes, this is police reform, but at the same time, we're talking about what we can change within the police department. How about what we can change in politics? You know, there are people that were put, hold on.
No, I'm sorry.
You had your opportunity. Okay. You know, when are we all need to be in this together. And yes, this conversation needs to be with the PBA. It needs to be with the police officers. It needs to be with the store owners. It needs to be, everybody needs, but just like bail reform, okay? Bail reform was a mistake at the beginning because one, they didn't even do their homework like they should have. And I think that it didn't work at first, and then adjustments had to be made. It's the same thing when it comes to this. We just can't jump into it. Let's just keep on doing the research and keep on working together. But it's more than police that have to be held accountable. It's people that have been put in those positions to hold the police accountable, and they haven't. And I'm not
Can I just because I was in those rooms. I was in the rooms in real life when we drafted the bail reform. I was like, I'm there. I'm the guy who, depending on where you're at in the state, I put the bail and bail reform, right? So like let's be like, and I'm not this guy. I'm a very conciliatory person, but I was in the room with the discovery, with the bail reform, with the speedy trial. These things are not new. Input was solicited over 30 years. And this is not to be political, but I'm going to be political for just a second. And I'm going to be partisan for just a second. Republican control of the New York State Senate is what prevented any reasonable police reform, pretrial reform for 30 something years. The American Bar Association for 30 something years, I'm an attorney as well, has been talking about discovery reform, bail reform, speedy trial reform. They've been talking about it. So let's talk about the message. If we're going to talk about the message, let's talk about it in a way that is measured and understanding, because we held hearings. I'm the chair of the codes committee. I held hearings on all of these things before. At budget hearings, when we were not in the majority, I asked questions of DCJS, state police, about these very same subject matter issues. Because people don't like the answer, they like to spin it in a direction which it doesn't go in. Bail reform was created and it was enacted in order to stop wealth-based detention, point blank, period. Absolutely. Right? The point of bail, as we all know, is not to leverage a plea or whatever the case may be that we see on TV. The point of bail is to guarantee someone's return to court. So I get recalcitrant when I hear these things about bail reform, which are not really accurate, right? Like in order to be fair, right? And especially there are so many people who were not happy with us changing the laws 3 months into it, and we changed the laws 3 months into it. And I'm speaking for New York City. I'm gonna speak for New York City because I can't speak for stats in Mount Vernon. But when the New York Post is rebutting what the New York Police Department is saying, that bail reform has increased crime, I think we've got a problem, because the New York Post has been no friend of police reform or pretrial reform. So like, I just want us to be, and this is, and Jen, I apologize for derailing the conversation in this way, but like, I when we're looking at what the issues are and who's at the table and what they say, when they say they're not at the table, people that are at the table, they just don't like what we're saying at the table. You can't say we weren't saying it, right? And it's the same argument I got with 50A, same argument we got with special prosecutor. We held hearings. And Vincent, I'm not trying to be confrontational, and you've seen me before. I'm not this guy. But when something that I've seen the genesis of, and being in the minority for years, not being able to do anything about it, and knowing that when Raise the Age took place, we were trying to see, hey, when Raise the Age takes place, do you want to do some sort of pretrial reform? Flatly rejected it. Like, and like we gotta talk about what it means to actually be policed, but not just be policed, but like, for example, I'm not a practicing attorney. William can tell you all about the pretrial stuff, right? I don't practice anymore, right? And it's the same way that I was going to get to a point, and this is kind of a ramble, but I'm not going to speak anymore after this, and I promise, Jen, I promise you I'm not going to speak anymore after this comment. We have to, as attorneys, do CLEs, continuing legal education. Every couple of years when we recertify, even though I don't practice, in order to keep my license, I have to do a certain number of training in a certain number of ethical areas, of a number of practice areas, in order to make sure that when I in good conscience register for my biannual registration, that I can say that I am doing that. When we're looking at policing, when we're looking at these things, some sort of CLE type of component should be implemented to kind of counteract these implicit biases, because I have to do that every couple of years in order to make sure that my even on a practice again, that I'm sharper as an attorney. I think that this is something that we should make sure that we are implementing. And again, I didn't mean to run off the topic of bail reform, but it's something that we still don't, we're not even a year into it. So we don't know what the data really says one way or another, if we're going to be completely fair. And
yeah, Senator, when I made those comments, it wasn't about being against bail reform or anything like that.
Right.
It was what I encountered as the executive officer of the Detective Division and the Patrol Division when dealing with repeat offenders and so on. It wasn't the overall bail reform, because I'll be the first one to tell you, I've listened to the horror stories in reference to why we hold people in jail because they can't afford it and so on, and definitely acknowledge the issue. So that, if it was taken out of context,
I apologize.
No, I agree. And these are the things that we've discussed within our subcommittee, is that our police officers, and I can tell you because I was there for 29 years, okay? You go to the academy, you come out, you get a little FTO training from an inexperienced police officer, and you get trained in CPR and firearms and defensive tactics. That's it. Okay. We're not teaching these officers about court rulings and legal updates, issues. They're not kept in the conversation and the loophole about bail reform and raise the age until it comes out. So now it's like, oh man, they got us doing all this stuff. So to me, that's the police department, the commissioners and the chiefs. There needs to be involvement. The officers need to be more than just robots who are out there writing reports. Okay. And that goes into what we've been talking about with training and stuff like that. The psychological exam needs to be reevaluated to see if it's culturally biased. Okay. Is there any way the psychological test can root out racist behavior or some sort of actions like that? There's so much to this that to just have a commission for a few months, make a recommendation and move on, definitely can't happen. There's just more to the table.
Well, one thing I would say, because Vinny, I think, directed the question to me, so I think I'm going to get an opportunity to answer that. And I think the Senator kind of answered a lot of it, but Vinny, I agree with you, Vinny. I agree that the city council should be doing a better job of overseeing. And I agree that the chief executive of the city should be doing better oversight. But there is a reason why CCRBs exist. Something has caused it for it to be created. Whether you want to say police misconduct, whatever you want to say.
And I don't oppose that. I don't oppose it.
No, I agree. And that is definitely the reason. But I agree with you 100%. It would be nice if we could all say, hey, listen, we got a city council and a mayor that could be, you know what? They're going to take care of business, because whatever complaint happens, they're going to deal with it. That, hey, I personally tend to think that we're getting that way with Derek Thompson on board, and maybe we'll get 3 more like him. But at the end of the day, yes, there's a reason why it exists, and we can't easily kind of dismiss that because the city council is not doing what they're supposed to do.
And also in our recommendations, we do have in the bullet list of outline, we do have a place for implicit bias training, and we also are recommending, I think, none of this is final, but additional training days for police officers.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. As much as sometimes I like to go against the administrative staff of the police department, to their credit, though, they have implemented some of those trainings that you were referring to already. Implicit bias training. We did that, I believe it was Last year we did that. So some of those training are being done here in Mount Vernon already. To their credit, I have to give credit, you know, so when you're talking about increasing
Before my
training
time,
days,
that's Commissioner Scott that was doing that way before when he was solo doing a lot of that stuff. So
you know, exactly, Commissioner.
And
So
even-
I have, but real quick, one thing, when you're talking about increasing training, right? That's where you get into a contractual issue because
That's right.
you're only entitled to a certain amount of training day per year. So now if you want to give these additional trainings, right? I know money's an issue in Mount Vernon. So what are you gonna do? Are you gonna pay the officers overtime to come in on those training days? Are you gonna restructure the contract? Or are you willing to restructure the contract where you're gonna give up something else for them to come in for those training days? So, you know, you have to keep that in mind also when you mention additional training
I
days.
could just answer that as one of the subcommittees, and as part of recruiting and retention, we also discuss training, even though I know another subcommittee is handling that. But one of the things that we were also talking about, and this would be administrative, it wouldn't even be contractual, is, you know, you guys, you know, you have 3 plug-in days. I think they should just be included with training days. There's just too much annual training that is needed for the police department to only have 5 training days. So I think plug-in days should be eliminated and those should be utilized for training. Other issues that we were talking about is having training modules that officers have to recertify, and they will take that during their tour of duty. Whether, however it's worked out, it could be each supervisor has to make sure one of the members of their squad takes a half hour, goes in, completes that module, and they could do training every day. And also roll call training. You know what? Roll call should be, give everybody a copy of their roll calls. They know where they are, and most of that time could be spent on going over training issues from things that have happened on calls that they've experiences, and, you know, whether they're crime scenes or whatever. And they need, you know, the supervisors to me need to be more hands-on with training. And I think that's how we could at least start attempting, because you're absolutely right. That's one thing we've said. It's a contractual issue, the training days, and to actually take people off the street to conduct the training also just needs to be worked out.
I think you're preaching to the choir because, like, not to them, but, you know, to me and Mastro, because everything you just said, we've already suggested that, getting rid of plug-in days. We've said that to them. And in regard to the training and roll calls, we have been implementing that, you know, with the new officers, because I know a lot of them are like, the average experience right now in Mount Vernon is probably 2 years, and I'm probably being generous, you know, so at roll calls, we do stress training and we do train them before they go out there.
One of the other issues that we're proposing is an exam for FTOs, an assessment exam for FTOs. We have field training officers that are not qualified for teaching, and there should be exam to assess them to see if they are qualified to teach these younger officers. And most of the time it is a younger officer teaching another younger officer, because that is a breakdown, because you have inexperienced cops training inexperienced cops.
Not to go into a whole, I'm sorry, Mastro.
No,
not to go into a whole
I'm going to say the same thing.
Yeah, when you're talking about the FTOs, right? It's hard to have FTOs who are experienced when nobody stays here, okay? You have guys, let's be honest. It happened when you were here. It happened when you were here.
It's worse now. Not that much time has gone by, but it's worse now.
Well,
I mean,
that goes into our retention part of our committee.
Yeah, we just lost 3 FTOs who had an average of not even 2 years each on. They had less than 2 years each.
Right. Other than the obvious reasons for officers leaving, does the PBA have any resolutions or any solutions or possible recommendations for retaining our officers? Because I've said this before in the meetings. We can do all this stuff, but if we keep on doing and training these officers to be the best they can be and be the best department, like I believe they already are, how do we keep these officers here and everybody cherry picking our guys, and now they succeed somewhere else?
Okay, let me introduce, I want to interject really quickly because I want to read, my plan was to read an excerpt of a resignation email that we just received recently from an officer that I thought was fitting for this conversation. And I'm actually going to mention Master Giorgio's name, and that's not to, you know, make you blush, but actually I just realized your name was in here. But Commissioner Scott, good afternoon, Commissioner. I just want to personally reach out to you to thank you for my time in the city of Mount Vernon. As of January 30th, 2021, I resigned from the department. However, this is not the main purpose of this email. I wanted you to know that I absolutely think Mount Vernon has some of the best police officers I have ever worked with, especially its supervisors. Supervisors like Lieutenant Mastrogiorgio, Delamora, Addison, and Sergeant McParkland are all impeccable leaders that make Mount Vernon so distinguishable. I believe this is a direct correlation as to how you operate and run your department. As I have stated previously in an email, I worked for NYPD for 4 years before coming to Mount Vernon, and I can say with ease that these two departments are not even comparable. You and these men lead by example and truly earn the respect from your cops, which is something very inspiring. This decision to leave was not an easy one due to the fact that I have absolutely nothing but great things to say about MVPD. I am honored to have worn the uniform and refer everyone I can to take the next upcoming exam. The main reason I had come to my decision is because of the issues in City Hall. The uncertainty of whether I will be laid off, not paid my raises, no health insurance, I went 2 months, no pay, 10 months, no health coverage, are the reason I've decided to part ways. Again, this decision was not easy. I absolutely enjoyed every day working for this department, excellent supervisors and leaders and command staff. Thank you for your time. Very respectfully submitted. So I wanted to just share that because I think that gives the background, you know, when we talk about in this commission, when we had the badge drain and I had a meeting and we talked about it, you know, I know sometimes people want to say, well, why are people leaving? And this was actually, there was no up for this officer as he's already left to send this email. But I thought it was telling for us to sort of realize, even with all of the background stuff and having all these things in place, we still have to deal with the bureaucratic issues and the organizational challenges that our officers face. And I think we have to be honest about what those are and meaningful and intentional about what those strategies are that we put in place. So I just wanted to say that. I also want to say that we are 9 minutes to the end of this. So I'm going to give Patrick Staff Sergeant Jean Jerome a final comment, Lieutenant Mastrogiorgio a final comment, and then I will shift it to Danielle and Councilman Thompson to close out, just because I want to be mindful of everyone's time. Okay, Sergeant Jean Jerome.
Yeah, thank you for having us here and letting us participate in this conversation. I think that's very important, and it will go a long way. I just want to make it clear that this PBA, right, is not about supporting someone or an officer who has committed a crime. All right. If they committed a crime, they've been convicted of that crime, this PBA has no issue in saying, you know what, you have to go. Because as Mastro pointed out before, you know, that's a reflection on us. And it makes our job a whole lot harder to do if we're going to go out there and support someone that commits a crime. So we're looking forward to working with you guys in the future and continuing this conversation. Thank you. Mastro?
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you guys. And yeah, you know, my email, I put it in the chat. If anybody has any questions or wants to talk, email me. I'd love to continue the conversation offline or even be, you know, come back and talk with all of you again on another Zoom. But, you know, good luck. And, you know, I really look forward to working with everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming in. Definitely an insightful conversation, a passionate one. And I think, you know, it'll help us in our work, right? So thank you everyone else for joining as well, for participating in the conversation. So I just want to go over some things that we talked about so that we close out on time. What I'm going to do is, so currently right now we have the deadlines. We're going to shoot for February 17th to finalize the you know, the report. So what that means is we have to meet several times in between that time so that we can actually get some good content and make sure it's flowing right so that we can produce a good product. February 24th, we're going to try to get into City Council And Councilman Derek Thompson is going to do everything in his power to make sure they're ready for us. Exactly. The iron fist. I love it. And yeah, so as Councilman Thompson said, please, if you can, let's plan to show up. If we need to wear a matching t-shirt so we make a statement on February 24th, let's do it, right? Our next meeting, we're going to meet next week, right? If you can't make it, we completely understand. We're going to continue to record these videos, but I implore you, please meet in between these meetings in your subcommittees. We need to get the drafts done. So I'm going to share a ton of documents. I'm actually going to share a Google Drive link, and then I'm going to break it down for the folks who aren't tech savvy. I'm going to give you the link to every document. Give me until the morning. I still have meetings tonight, so give me until the morning. And I promise I'm gonna send this video out. I'm gonna send the Google Drive link. I'm gonna send the bullet points. And so I'm also gonna coordinate with Mary, Ondum, and DC Lacker to well, not DC Lacker, to consolidate the bullet points and the reports that we receive from the different committees. If you have any thoughts or anything like that, please let me know. Feel free to email me, Councilman Thompson, Senator Jamal Bailey. I don't know if you wanted that shout out there, Senator, but DC Lackett as well as the co-chairs. We're doing our best to make this the most efficient process as possible. Also, it's really draft and reports, and I'll send out all of the reports I've received. It'll be in a Google document, as I said, and I'll also have the breakdown. Any final questions? Look at this, we have 5 minutes to spare. This is the first. Sorry. Okay, well, so we'll be in touch. I'll send out everything, give me until the morning time, and Mary and Ondum, look out for an email so we can coordinate a time. But please, subcommittees, please, please, please meet in between time and flesh out your, if you come up with recommendations, flesh them out. If you want to meet, if you want to present to the group, or at least some of the group, and see how they feel about your recommendations, please feel free to set up a time and we can all coordinate. If we need a Zoom link or something like that, let us know.
If I may, before we close, Danielle, I'm out of breath from out here shoveling out my car. They're making us go back to work tomorrow.
Oh,
but I know we're gonna have a work session with the council this Monday. I'm gonna make sure that I continuously put the bug in the council's ear, because I know some of us as council, we don't process as well as others. So I make sure that they'll have it on their plate before we present. So I don't want them to say that they've never heard about it. We've already placed the bug in the air already, but I just want them to know about our progress. So when we finally come to the table, it's no surprise, although there will be some who still act surprised. That's why I want us to show up in a wolf pack to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable for what's needed in our city. And I appreciate everyone who came online, because the common ground between all of us is we want to make sure that we have everything in place to do what's right and what's best for our city. So I appreciate each and every one of us who are on the call. And as long as we continuously work together, we'll make sure that what needs to be done will be done. So I'm grateful for every one of you pitching in. Thank you so much.
Awesome, guys. So have a good night, and just look out for an email from me in the morning. And thank you to our guests, Mr. Hardy, Lieutenant, Sergeant. You all were amazing, and I'll send out all the things by the morning. Have a good night, guys.
Thank you.
Night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Have a great one.
Thank you so much.
All right.